Welcome back to the Director's Garage. Jazz hands. I'm your resident idiot, Michael. Who else would I be? And today's episode, we're going to be talking about this Grado product that I didn't get to in last week's episode. And then we're going to talk about one of my favorite types of music ever, and that's Motown. I got a full deal on Motown. First, I'm going to get to a quick headline. And my headline is this. This is the new issue of Stereophile, and on page 33, right here, Western Electric 300B. How about that? We were way ahead of the curve on this one. We were talking about the 300B 6 months ago. I introduced that product to you, and we endorsed it and all sorts of goodness on the Director's Garage. So I just like to point that out once in a while. We beat somebody to something. We're talking Stereophile. This is like, one of the industry Bibles. This and the Absolute Sound Task, pretty cool. They're finally getting around to it. Have I mentioned I'm an idiot lately? And that's your quick little headline for today. So, holy mother of hell, it has been hot as Jesus here in Los Angeles. But Jesus is a technical word, look that up, meteorology school. Summer is in absolute full swing, and there is no music that I more associate with summer than soul, and more specifically Motown. It's music that just speaks to me. Motown had an incredible run of hits in the 1960s. Gorgeous harmonies, inventive melodies, irresistible hooks. Motown for me has always epitomized that sound of summer, even more so than, say, the Beach Boys, which I love the Beach Boys too, but I'd blast the four tops on my radio out the T-tops or convertible, depending on the year and what car I was driving at the time. It's music you can play at a barbecue, people love to dance to it, but it's also loaded with angst and social commentary and heartbreak. I will warn you that some of this story gets a little bit on the uncomfortable side. It deals with issues of race, but we're all adults here, and it's a fascinating story, and it's one I'm going to talk about in today's episode. Well, part of the story anyway. And I'm going to start in the 1950s, which was a fairly confusing time, racially anyway. It was an era where segregation was still the norm. You had separate drinking fountains and separate bathrooms and separate restaurant seating. And neighborhoods, entire neighborhoods were segregated across railroad tracks or streets. You wouldn't go past this bridge or whatever. But the first crossover, the first mixing of cultures that happened in America was really music. And there are so many different threads on this story that I could pull, but I'm going to try and focus on a few noteworthy to the Motown sound. And I'll start with a musical style out of Baltimore called doo-wop. It featured groups like the Orioles and the Moonglows and the Clovers and the Five Satins. This was basically the old barbershop quartet sung with an R&B rhythm by black musicians, and the sound would be critical to Motown's evolution. If you listen close, you will find there's not that large a leap from doo-wop harmonies to those of the Supremes or, say, the Temptations. R&B, or rhythm and blues itself, is a term that came from Billboard magazine, a writer named Jerry Wexler, who thought that the previous name, Race Records, was too unattainable to the masses. Now get this, this is an early race record. And I can't believe I'm calling it this. I can't even believe we have to have this conversation. But this is an early race record. The trumpet is played by the amazing, amazing Louis Armstrong in his prime. One of the best performances and best pieces of music of the 20th century. And yet, you couldn't get it unless you were willing to buy a race record. It's on the OK label. This is something of a collector's item. These are really hard to come by, this particular recording, because it is so monumental. But it's hard to conceive of this, but me even holding this record in front of you right now would have been thought of as so controversial in the 1920s. This record came out in 1929, and the major labels wouldn't touch a song like this. So you'd have an artist like Bing Crosby on a major label like Decca, and they couldn't put out an artist like Louis Armstrong because you had to keep the artists separate. And how silly is that? OK was a label founded by the Otto Heinemann Phonograph Corporation, but it was purchased in 1926 by a major label, Columbia Records, because although they wouldn't tarnish their fine label by putting black artists on them, they sure did like to make money, and there was a lot of money to be made off of race records or music by black artists. And by reclassifying this in about 1950 or so as R&B, it somehow made all of this much more palatable to white audiences. And then a Cleveland disc jockey named Alan Freed took R&B and its crossover artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino, kind of grouped it with some of the white musicians, the Carl Perkins and the Elvis Presleys of the time, and started calling it rock and roll. And because of this classification change in part, and also Alan Freed naming it all rock and roll under one label, you began to see black artists charting on the Billboard pop charts, and that meant airplay. Still, a guy like Little Richard was going to have a hard time finding an audience no matter what, at least in mass appeal. Though he did appear on The Ed Sullivan Show as early as 1955, but knowing that widespread acceptance was never going to really happen, the labels would have their white artists do these ridiculously homogenized cover versions of black artists' songs. If you want a real laugh, go up on YouTube and listen to Little Richard's version of Tutti Frutti, and then listen to the white version performed by Pat Boone. The butchering of that classic so that a white audience would accept it is hysterical. The label made Boone strip the song of its heart and its energy, the very essence of what made the song great in the first place. So it's in this landscape that a guy named Berry Gordy opens a record shop in Detroit in the 1950s. Berry was a former professional boxer and a Korean War vet who returned home and tried a few odd jobs, including the auto industry. Berry loved the local music scene, and in 1957 he visits a bar in nearby Ohio and meets a singer named Jackie Wilson. He started writing for Jackie, and the two penned Jackie's hit, Lonely Teardrops. It was a crossover hit, and one that broke the top 10 on the pop charts. Still not that common for a black artist in 1957. But as a writer, even though the song was a hit, it paid a laughable amount. Berry's first royalty check was for $3.19, and he kept the check uncashed and framed on his wall for a lot of years. In those days, you'd record a song, and if you didn't have a label, you would syndicate the song to record presses around the country and hope that any sales profits would find their way back to you. Of course, the music business being as opportunistic as it was, it rarely happened. So Berry decided to start his own label. He named it Tamla, which would be renamed Motown about a year later. He did it on an $800 loan from his family, and he'd run Motown using what he learned from working in the auto industry. Employees would punch a clock in and out. Every song was inspected and critiqued for quality control before releasing it. Motown, much like the automakers, would become an assembly line for making music. It was a 24-hour operation, rolling out hit after hit. Berry really had two gifts. One, he knew when a song would be a hit. And two, he had an uncanny knack for spotting and nurturing raw talent. His most important discovery was a local band called The Miracles, and its lead singer, one Bill "Smokey" Robinson. The two had become lifelong friends, and their partnership turned out to be a key to Motown's success. Smokey knew how to write incredible hooks, but he didn't know how to put it all together and write a hit song. So Berry took Smokey under his wing and taught him the art of songwriting, and one early hit was Shop Around. It was a bluesy number with a slow tempo. It was released locally without much fanfare, and one morning as Smokey was recovering from a cold, he got a call from Berry, who had a spark of inspiration about the tune. He urged Smokey to come back into the recording studio at 3 a.m. to record the song with a faster tempo. Now, the faster tempo version was released nationally and sold over 1 million copies and topped the R&B charts and made it all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Motown had its first smash hit and premiere act in Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. But Barry wanted his new label to have mass appeal, and if he could present the music in a way that white audiences could accept, the sales would be massive. So artists were carefully groomed for their stage performance, impeccable outfits and choreography. Presentation was as important as the music at Motown. It was a full, complete package. Song subjects were also topics of mass appeal: love, heartbreak, dancing. The same topics you would find on the country charts at the time. Meantime, Barry went on a tear acquiring talent, signing Norman Whitfield and Little Stevie Wonder, creating a stable of gifted talent that became the envy of the music industry. He gave young artists room to grow, and he fostered a family atmosphere at Motown. Everyone was expected to pitch in. For instance, Smokey had the idea to record a dance song, something he'd never done before. He found this song called Mickey's Monkey, written by a legendary trio I'm going to talk about in a second. But during the recording process, they decided that a bunch of background singers would give the song kind of this party atmosphere and make the recording stand out. So for the session, he recruited some of the idle talent hanging around the Motown studio, calling in Diana Ross and Mary Wilson from the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas, members of the Temptations and Marvelettes, as well as an up-and-coming young drummer still looking for a hit, someone named Marvin Gaye. I can't imagine what that recording session was like. Singer Eddie Holland had a hit-or-miss career as a performer. Lamont Dozier was a Motown session musician, and Eddie's brother Brian Holland was on the Motown staff as a songwriter. He was credited for co-composing the Marvelettes' Please Mr. Postman, which featured Marvin Gaye on drums. The three teamed up to become Motown's greatest hitmakers, and it just kind of worked like that at Motown. Idle bodies would be contributing in any way they could and teaming up with other artists. That was Motown, everybody in, and Barry held the music to the highest standard, his own. But without Holland, Dozier, Holland, the world would have never heard Heatwave, Stop in the Name of Love, or This Old Heart of Mine, to name a few. Suddenly. Can you imagine rejecting a song like the Supremes' Baby Love? Yet Berry Gordy did just that, telling Diana Ross the hit was lacking something to make it sound special and unique. It was too reminiscent of her first hit, Where Did Our Love Go? So Diana went back in the studio and recut the top of the song, adding the break with the ooh, hoo. It's a bad representation, but she gave that song that unique intro, and it became the Supreme's second #1 hit. Those smallest details mattered. Now, the goal for any artist at Motown was to get on the Motown tour. This is where you became known. You'd travel around the country and perform for audiences as a part of the Motown brand. This is how you got known in the days before MTV and YouTube. It's where you got to make some extra money for performing, too, on top of your salary as a recording artist for Motown. One group that kind of lingered around for years trying to get on the tour was the Temptations. And it wasn't until Smokey Robinson took them on and began writing for them that they got their first hits and finally earned their slot on the Motown tour. For me, the magic of Motown is in the songwriting and in the performance. The Motown sound is definitely unique. It's a brand. But to my ears, it always lacked a little bit of the range, and the recording process always made things come out sounding a little bit on the flat side, especially in those early years. And this was in part due to a lack of instrument separation. And that happened because the studio itself was relatively small, especially by today's standards. It was tiny. It was a postage stamp. The engineers have commented over the years about how mic bleed was always an issue because the instruments were so close together. and mic'd so close together. Yet I still love listening to these songs because when Smokey wails tracks of my tears, you feel the angst and the pain and the hope that this time love will somehow win out. Very stable of songwriters and singers and musicians churned out 110 top 10 singles over 10 years. It was an unprecedented level of success that drew the admiration of everyone from the major labels on the West Coast to the Beatles, who released their own versions of You Really Got a Hold on Me and Please Mr. Postman. There can be no greater tribute to the quality of the Motown writing. One last point I'd like to mention about the Motown Hit Factory is that, like all good assembly lines, you're only as good as your workers, and Motown's house sound came from extraordinarily talented sessions musicians like Benny Papazita Benjamin or Eddie Bongo Brown, or guitarists Joe Messina and Eddie Chank Willis, the great bassist James Jamerson, or Ray Parker Jr., who later scored a hit with Ghostbusters in the 80s. And they were led by their keyboardists and band leaders Joe Hunter and later Earl Van Dyke. Collectively, the studio musicians were known as the Funk Brothers. And on the West Coast, you had the Wrecking Crew, and you had the Swampers at Muscle Shoals in the South. The Funk Brothers were so tight because they literally played together for hours and hours every single day. It's how I heard it through the grapevine. My Guy, I second that emotion. You Can't Hurry Love, and My Girl maintained that sonic through line that was unmistakable as the Motown sound. The story of Motown is much deeper, but I wanted to talk about it a bit today because it's the sound I most associate with this time of year. And I know I'm painting it perhaps with a very romantic brush in some ways, because there would be controversies. Helen Dozier Holland would leave, and Diana Ross would branch out into her solo career, and the company would get sold. But when you get down to it, Barry took an $800 loan from his family and turned it into a $400 million empire that gave us the real sounds of summer. I love this story. It gets much richer, and I didn't even touch on the Jackson 5 and Gladys Knight and Mary Wells and dozens of other gifted performers discovered by Gordy. He's just the stuff of legend. So I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the Motown sound and its roots, and I love to tell great stories, and Motown's is one of America's greatest. And now we're going to turn from a Detroit company to this company out of Brooklyn, New York, Grado. This is a product that was sent to me last week in the Double-Double with the Canara Nana by Audio 46, which is your personal audio superstore, if you didn't know. We'll talk a little bit more about Audio 46 later. I'm not going to do a full plug right now, but we got this Grado, and I haven't even looked at the model number on this. I wanted to keep it kind of fresh and spontaneous for this episode. So what do you say we open this and see what it is we got from Grado? And I swear, I have not looked at this at all. And it looks like it's a flippy... No, it's just a flip box, okay? And here we go. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go. It's a piece of paper. And this paper that we just revealed comes with all Grado products. I've seen this before. It's a little hello from the family and how it's been doing business for 65 years, and it's signed by the 3 generations of Grado. And so here comes the actual product, which I assume is going to be under this piece of paper if I'm lucky. I always knew it was you, Grado.
Hey!
10 points if you can guess where that's from. And are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go. Oh,
Break that
now. The SR80X. This is the Prestige Series SR80X. So this should be a fun experiment because I own the SR225, which goes for just over $200. This is about $100 less, I believe. And it's the SR80. I'm familiar with some of the Grado line. I'm a fan of their brand. I love that it's an American company. I love that it's like all out of Brooklyn. And we're going to run through a couple of tracks here real quick while I've got you here. and we'll do a quick audition of this headphone. But I can tell you right now, for 125 bucks, these are likely going to be a purchase for sure. So I love that these are just kind of a light, get-me-over pair of open backs. It's something you can just have some fun with. And I'm going to go to, let's see, let's go to some Motown, because why not? Why not do it up right? They're just it's a fun pair of headphones. So great. It's got decent bass. It's a little on the bright side, but it is an open backs pair, and signed, sealed, delivered. I love the crispness. I love the separation. I love the bite of the horns. Grado just makes great. I have not heard a bad Grado ever. I've never put on a Grado and gone, gosh, this is awful. They know what they're doing. It's got a specific sound. They are a little bit on the bright side, but it's just gorgeous. Go to some with bite. Now, when later Motown, they got into more, they did more socially conscious things. It's like the Temptations, and here's "Livin' for the City," which is a gritty song. Bass has got attitude. Again, touch on the bright side, but nothing too offensive. Drums, great drums. Like I said, just maybe a little bright on the top end, but at $100, $125, you're not going to go wrong with this headphone. It's a good, economical choice for, if you have $125, buy these. There's no problem with them. You're not gonna find something better for $125. This is great. This is gonna make me want to pull out my old 225s and listen to them. Maybe we'll do that when we do the shootout with the Canera. Oh, it's so good, and this music is so good. So going to Smokey Robinson, Tracks of My Tears. This is a 192 MQA file. And the tambourine is like right here at 11 o'clock. And they always record distortion in their drums at Motown. It's so cool. It's intentional. They put distortion in the drums. Yeah, just soulful stuff. The bass does kick, and I'll give it a bass test song just for the hell of it to look at how deep it goes. This Motown stuff is so good, though. I hate to turn it off ever. Okay, we're gonna go to a couple of fidelity tracks just to balance it out. This is Hotel California, which is it's a great standard audition track to listen to something off of. And again, nice bass, great imaging, great instrument separation. Everything sounds cohesive. It's a good, solid pair of headphones for $125. I got no problem with this. And I listened to some other stuff over the past few weeks that were cheaper. The Phoenix by Civica. I'd take this any day over the Civica. This has got bite. It's got attack. It's a very clean treble. It's a and this is an iconic headphone. This has been around for a long time, and it keeps selling. And there's a reason to keep selling. This is great stuff. Okay. Just for fun of just for the fun of it, I'm going to go to some Miles real quick and listen to one of the greatest albums of all time. We're doing that today. Kinda Blue. Yeah. If you've got $125, just go buy them. Oh, yeah. These are great. These are great headphones, man. You don't have to spend a fortune in this hobby to get something of high quality. I'm going to stop it here because, man, this is what it's about. You don't need to spend gazillions of dollars on amps and DACs and all this stuff to have something that's going to give you a good experience. This is a perfect example of that. Very simple design. They're comfortable. They're not moderately, they're not the over-engineered demons, but they produce really good sound. I mean, there's flashing on the sides here that could have been maybe filed down or something from the mold. Who cares? These are great headphones at $125. They're great. They're great. If you have a little extra money and you want to try something different, this is a great entry into a Grado experience and begin to understand what the Grado house sound is, because it's great. It sounds fabulous. It's a little on the brighter side with good solid bass and a nice open presentation with a good detail, great detail. Really enjoyable headphone. And really, when you look at what Audio 46 has sent to us, this is like the ice cream or the dessert that came with the Canaro, which was a fabulous meal of a headphone, and this to me is like a nice sorbet at the end of the night. Fantastic. What a great inclusion, and I thank Audio 46 for sending this to us today. So I hope you enjoyed the unboxing of the Grado SR80X and our first listen, a little first sound check there. And again, I can't recommend it. Great company, and it just proves to you that you don't need to spend thousands to get yourself a nice audiophile experience. And the SR80 will certainly do just that for just about $125. Great set, great company. And I got to thank Audio 46 for providing this Grado for us to review today. They are your personal audio superstore, and if you use the coupon code Director's Garage, all one word, you can save about 5% on nearly everything they sell, except Grados. It won't work with Grados, I'm sorry to say. But almost everything else in the store, you'll get that 5% discount. And I'm thrilled to be able to offer you guys the discount. It's really at the core of what we do around here. So take care of yourselves and stay cool, and let me know in the comments below what your favorite songs of summer are. What's your sound that you go to, your summer hack, if you will. And we're going to be back next week with the sound check of the Canaro Nana, and I might even pull out those old Grados and see if we can do some A-Bing between the 80 and the 225 SRs from Grado. That would be kind of a fun thing to do, don't you think?
Yeah.
Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, or a thumbs down if you thought I really sold Motown short. You sold Motown short. Let me know anyway, and I will see you guys before you know it.